Hi guys, I'm Tanya.
I'm Tobi.
And we are Chassidim of Quarantine. We run a social media account where we talk Chassidus in the most basic terms that we can because that's how we like it.
We started the account because everyone was sitting at home during quarantine and we felt like if they're going to scroll for hours on end, then we should probably add some goodness to it, make it worth their while. So we're here with a weekly Parsha podcast, and what we're going to try to do is take the Parsha and make it something practical, make it a conversation, and bring different references like Hasidic references or from different sources, secular or not, and we're going to try to make it applicable to our lives and to current events.
There we go. So the Parsha, did you explain what the Parsha is?
The Parsha is a weekly portion of the 5 books of the Torah, and they're broken up into different portions to help us understand and relate to life, because Torah essentially is a guide for life. This week's Parsha, we're focusing on Chaya Sarah, which is about the end of the life of Sarah and Sarah. I'm spacing out. Okay, we're going to continue. Anyways, Sarah was the wife of the first Jew, Avram Avinu, and she dies at the beginning of this Parsha at the age of 127 years old. And her husband, Avram Avinu, goes out to purchase a place for her to be buried from a man named Ephron, and at first he wanted to give it to him Ephron wanted to give it to Avram for free, but then Avram insisted on paying because it would essentially get really messy in the future. So he ended up buying a place in Hebron in Israel called the Machpelah Cave, and all the forefathers and foremothers are buried there. The next part of the Parsha, Avram sends his servant Eliezer to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. So Eliezer goes out and he travels, and he asks God for a sign that he should know who should be the wife of his servant's son. And so he goes to the well, and Rivka comes along, and the water rises, and he knows that she's the one, and he gives her all these like jewelry and nose rings and bangles and all the good stuff. And after much toil, struggle, they finally get it. She agrees to go back with Eliezer, and on the way back, she sees Yitzchak praying in the field and gets off her camel and realizes that this is the person she's supposed to marry. And then when she enters Yitzchak's mother's tent, the 3 miracles that were there when his mother was alive, which was the bread stayed fresh, the candles stayed lit, and the God's glory rested on top of the tent. And then Avram remarries his second wife from earlier on, who now goes by Keturah. Her name was Hagar before, but she changed her ways and she's a different person, therefore she goes by a different name. And then at the end of the Parsha, Avram dies, and he's buried by his wife, and next to his wife by his sons.
And basically the part of the Parsha that we are focusing on is right at the beginning, where it says that Sarah lived for 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, which was a total of 127 years. But instead of just saying that, it goes through each one individually. And that actually is specifying to each of the amounts separately. So it's saying that when she was 100, she was as a 20-year-old when it came to her sins. So she was... a 20-year-old is considered to have not sinned, and therefore she, at 100, was at the same level. And then it says 7 years because when she was 20, she was as beautiful as a 7-year-old. And then we look at the end of that pasuk, and it says that these were the years of her life. So it's like, why does it have to repeat that after telling us that those were the years? And it's because it says that all the years of her life were equally as good, which doesn't actually make sense, because Sarah had a really hard life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the Lubavitch Rebbe comments on this in a book called the Kodei Sichos, which is compilations of talks that he would give, and he's actually wondering on this question. So that is what we're going to focus on in this podcast, and we're going to start off by discussing certain things why the Rebbe was asking this, because there were so many things that went wrong in her life. Like, first of all, she was barren until the age of 99, which honestly, it could be easily overlooked, because someone who doesn't relate to that doesn't necessarily understand what a struggle it is to be like for 99 years, that's much. And she was kidnapped twice, which is much more than the average person.
So these two kings, they kidnapped Sarah at two different times in her life. They were two totally different situations. And both times these kings wanted to marry her against her will. And Avram said that it was his sister, so the king thought he was allowed to take her. And yeah, long story short, it was a really difficult life and there was a lot going on. She then died of literal heartbreak because she thought that her son Yitzchak was being taken as an offering to God, and she passed away.
Okay, so again, as we mentioned before, that the Torah is a guide. It's there to help us through life and understand things in different ways, and every single scenario, every single thing in the Torah has a lesson for us. So here, what do we learn from the fact that Sarah had all these struggles in her life, and they were crazy ones too? What can we learn from her and take it into our personal lives? So her perspective, or the way she took life, was that she had these challenges and they were much, but she still lived her life to the fullest extent. She didn't let it just pass her by. And it says that about Avram also. It said he came in his days, meaning like old people, what they do is, well, not all of them, but they sit around and days pass and then they die and it's over. But Avram really made the fullest of his days, and then again Sarah with all the days of her life. And we brought in some really cool quotes from different sources to emphasize this point.
So the first source that we brought in was actually Viktor Frankl, who some of you might be familiar with. He is a Holocaust survivor who also happens to be a psychologist and neurologist, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is based off of his experiences with the Holocaust and what he watched other people go through as well as himself. And it kind of gives us a look into how people moved on from those situations and how people moved further with their lives after that.
All right, so the first quote we have from him was, where is that? Everything can be taken from man, but one thing to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances and to choose one's own way. So he experienced some really, I don't know if gory is the word, really intense. He experienced something that none of us have ever experienced. And what he realized was people were literally going to their graves, but they still had a choice. Either we can kind of make the most of or just really take advantage of what we have, or they could think we're gonna die anyway and let it just pass on by.
Exactly. And even in less intense situations, obviously we aren't going through quite the same struggles right now, but we do have our own situations, and we have to realize that we can't control the circumstances at all. They come to us. God decides what we end up with and what we don't, and based off of that, we only get to choose how we react to those situations and how we are going to move forward from that, and what we're going to take from every situation and use to make other situations better.
And then we have another quote that says, in some ways suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds its meaning. So this is basically saying that even in situations where things absolutely suck, to not let it get the best of you and really take control of the situation and acknowledge that you have the power, that it's up to you to really take it into your own hands.
Exactly. And essentially suffering is just a means to an end. It's in order to process a situation, move on from it, and then find a way to use whatever tool or whatever new information you learned from that situation and to apply it to the next things that come your way.
And then, but the thing is, we're not saying that if you're upset or you're going through something to just kind of get over it and just okay, I'm sad and I'm gonna wallow in my sorrows. And no, we're saying that you have to find this point in the middle, this
neutral
mindset where you can decide that okay, I'm not happy right now, but also how can I process this and use it to my advantage, make it better for myself. You don't necessarily have to be jumping off the walls out of joy and super happy about life, but just understand that what's happening to you is for a reason, and your reaction is what's going to make it the situation. That's exactly what's going to make the outcome.
Essentially, it's not practical for us to just say, we're going to be happy all the time, because it doesn't make sense. And we were given a huge array of emotions for a reason. We are given emotions of anger and sadness, and it's because we're meant to use them obviously in the proper situations and with the proper amounts, but they are, again, a means to an end. They're meant to allow us to process things properly, and we actually know that through taking time in between a situation and reacting to it, you have the time in between to think about it and decide how you're going to react, which emotions you're going to apply to that situation. And that is where our freedom comes from. We don't get to choose anything other than how we react to things. And through those reactions, you literally build your life. You build the tools that you take from life, and you learn how to move forward and how to mature and grow into the person that you are.
And the Torah actually talks about it in different places. First of all, it talks about it in the Tanya, which is, I think, a watered-down version of Kabbalah, or just...
Yeah.
It's the Tanya.
Simple
it's
man's
awesome.
Kabbalah.
It's a guide to life. And it also talks about when's the appropriate time to be upset. Like, knowing that I'm upset now, but it's going to get me to a better place. So, like, really understanding, like, what's happening to you, but understanding that you're not going to just stay there and you're going to get up and do something about it. And it also talks about the Shiva process, how a person sits Shiva for a week, but there are certain tedious rules and everything into making it a proper grieving process.
Exactly. So the fact that the Torah discusses Shiva, discusses mourning, means that there's room for that. There's room to be upset and to mourn situations and to mourn people and whatever it is. But then from that, where do we go? Do we sit and listen to sad music and extend that 1 minute of sadness into huge amounts of time? Or are we going to take that and process it, cry, get over it, and then think about it? What am I going to take from the situation? What can I learn from the situation? Or sometimes you can't do anything, but then what am I going to do to elevate the other aspects of my life so that things are more balanced?
Right. And what's really cool is that, again, everything, I feel like history is constantly repeating itself. So Tanya and I were discussing how this perspective has very much to do with what's going on right now, which is, in case you haven't noticed, a international pandemic. And our perspective on this was that people were either sitting at home and upset and gaining weight or taking on bad habits or just sitting around and moping. And then there's those people that learn to do really cool things and really take advantage, like learn a skill, learn a language, learn anything, start working out. I don't know. People were taking on so many things.
Sourdough. Everybody makes sourdough.
Everyone apparently makes sourdough now, and we're all professional tie-dyers and hair cutters.
There you go.
So it was really a choice. You could either take the situation and, wallow in your own sorrows and your own misery, or you could be like, hey, I get to do all these things I wanted to do that I was never able to do before. I was definitely able to do stuff I wasn't able to do before. I was able to learn with friends, which is, something you always talk about and you never end up doing. And we were able to start Chassidim of quarantine, which has been the funnest thing ever. Got us here. We were able to do so much, and it was I saw it as an incredible opportunity to do all these things. And I was talking to friends that are like, I'm so ew, I'm so bored, nothing to do, watch the entire Netflix, watch the entire everything, and it just showed me that it's really a choice, and you really get to you get to choose the outcome of your situation.
Exactly. And then I think it also knocks sense into you. COVID sounds like a movie. These things don't happen in real life. There's not some pandemic and people don't walk around with masks and you can't touch each other and you can't stand next to each other. It doesn't happen. And the fact that something so intense and so crazy is happening right now is a wake-up call. We literally have zero control over anything that happens in this world, and we just have to deal with it properly. And we started Chassidim of quarantine, or we also could have just eaten and wallowed just and
instead of learning all that time we could have learned, we would have sat
exactly
and ate.
I mean, so quarantine weight
thank
is
God
a real
for
thing.
Chassidus, because otherwise we would have been obese. And so that's really what we get from the situation. And again, back to Sarah, back where we started, she could have Avram too. Avram's very much involved in this. He's the OG. He's the first too.
They were in it together.
They were in it together very much. And they really, I guess that makes them a power couple, because what they did was they took life and they were like, I'm not letting it pass by. I don't know if they sat down and had that conversation, but they didn't let it pass them by, and they were really able to focus on the task at hand. And that's what they're noted for in the Chumash, that they didn't let the days just pass them by, and they did make every day to the fullest.
Exactly. And like we also spoke about this idea of Cheshvan, which we are in right now, where there's just nothing happening. There's no holidays. There's no, like, nothing exciting. And it kind of seems like dull. Like there's just all this time, and what am I going to do? Am I going to think? Like, people do not like to be alone with their thoughts. But sometimes those thoughts are what leads us to accepting ourselves. And
that's like the best and worst thing that can happen to you.
Exactly.
You could either be really happy, like sitting and thinking about stuff, or you could be like, oh shoot, someone get me out of my own head.
Exactly. But like, you could take that and you could be like, you know, you could wallow and you could be overthinking everything, or you could think like, we just came out of Tishrei, and like, hopefully you guys feel the same, but I feel like Tishrei has so much growth in it. Like, there's so many holy days and so much time to contemplate and to grow as a person, both spiritually and just maturity-wise, and to just take that time to work on yourself. And then Cheshvan, we're just accepting that. And it's kind of the same idea with this, that like, you just have to accept the situations that come to you. You have to accept where your life is holding. And
you don't have to, but you should learn to.
You should.
You should learn. No, just like learn. And well, meditate is a bit of a lofty experience,
Yeah,
but like,
that is what it is.
Find ways to relate to it and understand it, and realize that you don't have to be stuck like that, and you don't have to force yourself out of it. Just try to find ways to like process it and work on it.
And also through that acceptance, you end up being a happier person. Like, I think a lot of people, like, I could talk from personal experience. I did have a period where I was really questioning my faith, and a lot of it is anger. It's because you don't accept the things that come to you. You think like, this is unfair. God gave me X, Y, and Z,
this
and
sucks.
I don't want it. Exactly. Like, why should I be sticking around when you don't have my back? Like, but a lot of it is just accepting that everybody's going to go through whatever they have to go through, and it's kind of out of our control. And then what are you going to do with that? Are you going to let it drag you down as a person, or are you going to grow from it and learn from those experiences and move on and become better?
I mean, I had a similar situation to Tanya, and I think a bunch of people listening potentially had that like, okay, this part of my life sucks, and what I'm gonna do is make it my own, but not in the way that like it benefits you. Like, go out and do things like, oh, like, these people don't approve of it, so I'm gonna go do it anyway because they suck and they're not I don't like them. But no, you have to kind of take these situations, grow from them, work with them, and just eventually you'll become a better person.
But a lot of that also comes with like maturity. Like, the reason that so many people are questioning themselves and are angry in their teens is because you just haven't.
I wish I had certain knowledge that when I was a teenager. I wish I had like some stuff I know. Like, obviously we're all still going, but I wish I had some of the knowledge I have now than from when I was a teen.
Exactly. But like, at the end of the day, you wouldn't have that knowledge without having gone through the situations that you went through. And through those, and through maybe you dealt with them improperly. I definitely dealt with things improperly. But like, after looking back at those and being like, you know, you go over it, and that's kind of why we make mistakes, so that we can contemplate them and realize that when similar situations come up in life, we can do things to change them, and we can react differently, and it will benefit us at the end of the day.
So I guess in a sense, I kind of go back in what I said. It benefited me not to have that information, because now that I went through stuff, I was able to like, oh, that's gross. I don't want to be like that. I want to move on and do something productive with my life. Again, I wouldn't have that knowledge that I have now, and I don't feel like I would be the same person if I hadn't gone through those experiences, and if I didn't really want to get to a better place from there. And it's not necessarily conscious. It's like, okay, I'm gonna drop that habit because it's not a vibe anymore.
Exactly. And it's also kind of cool to like look at Avram and Sarah, because you would think that like, you know, good people have it good, holy people get all the brachos, and like, that's really just not how it goes.
We like dig deeper, and we kind of realize that like it wasn't all that, and that they were holy people, but at the end of the day, I guess they just had a slight advantage that they were able to realize that it was God because he was the first person to acknowledge God, and he was able to bring that out to the world. And if they didn't have that acknowledgement, it probably wouldn't be the same. But because they did, they were able to live their days out to the fullest. And that's honestly goals, to live every day to its maximum potential. Like sometimes I'll come back from work and be like, ugh, I did not live my days maximum potential. And that actually brings me down, because it's like, let's say it's super nice out and I was doing things I didn't enjoy doing. And it's like, I could have been out. Well, it's not a regret, but it's just a frustration that how much better it could have been. But then again, we learn from those things. And then the next time we have the opportunity to do that, we take full advantage.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, that's a really cool idea to think, like, when I get to the end of my life, am I going to be able to say that all the days of my life were equally as fulfilled, that every single year had just as much meaning? And I think that's a really cool thing to think about. And a lot of people reach the end of their life and they realize that, like, there was so much more potential and so much more time that could have been used, and it just wasn't.
Let's bring it all together. So we gave the nice background of the Parsha. There was a few events going on, but we focused on Sarah Imenu, who we're talking about after her life, after she passed. And we're focusing on the fact that despite the things that happened to her, she still managed to live her days out to the fullest. She still managed to take full advantage and live life to its fullest extent.
Exactly. And it's all just the mindset. It's having that mindset of growth. And as much as you could go through really difficult things in your life, take it with a lot of sugar and
just a spoonful of
exactly
sugar.
And then move on from it and take something from it. Learn from every situation. There might not be, sometimes you have to look for it, but there's always
no regrets.
Exactly. There's always something to gain from every situation and every bad idea and every mistake. And
those are the best situations to learn from.
Exactly.
Because that even more so, especially those bad ideas, just so you're not to do it again.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay connected.